Sunday rolls out. We're here in Mississippi, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State had good years, but overshadowed because there's so much star power in the league. Ole Miss finishes 8th, Mississippi State finishes 10th. They're going to the tournament. Blake, I still believe that they're dangerous, and if they get the right draw, they could win a game or two, or maybe really get hot in the NCAA tournament. When you look at what Jans and Beard have done, what do you see?
Yeah, I agree with you, and we feel like sometimes we say that in the SEC, where it's like, well, just let these teams get away from each other, and they're going to be okay. But it's like that has to apply this year, right? Because we talked about the strength of the league. I think you are going to see some of these teams like this, where we've seen them hit some rough patches down the stretch, and you're like, okay, well, do we need to completely rethink our idea of what they can be? I don't know about that just yet, because I do feel like they both have different sort of approaches that can help them be successful, right? The one thing I feel like I've talked about with Ole Miss all season long is that, for starters, they're one of the most experienced teams in the country. We know what experience is doing for teams in the NCAA tournament, at least the past couple of years. They don't beat themselves. They're great at not turning the ball over, and they're great at turning over the other team. And I think when you look at some of those teams that have that kind of success, you got old guards that take care of the ball, and they're able to turn defense into offense. That's a lot of what Ole Miss does, and I think from that standpoint, that gives them an opportunity to be very successful. I mean, we're talking about a top 30 team offensively and defensively. And, yes, they have 10 losses, but, again, we have to put it within the context of where those losses came and who they came to. And I think they're going to be, one that I was saying probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'm like, hey, don't be surprised if Ole Miss is kind of one of those teams that winds up in the Elite Eight, because they have sort of the makeup of the teams that can do that, just with all those things I just mentioned. And Mississippi State, I said to someone last week, they're probably the most confusing team in the SEC, just because, man, you see how good they can be, and then you see some of those stretches where they just are really struggling. And, I feel like that Arkansas game was a perfect example where, all right, looks like you're going to lose. You make the valiant comeback, then, wind up losing. Like, just lots of sort of roller coaster type emotions, I feel like, with this team over the past little bit. But, listen, anytime you have a player like Josh Hubbard, anytime you have what I think is still one of the most underrated coaches in the country, Chris Jans, I think that they're going to be in a position where it's all about the draw. We always say the matchups matter. I think for Mississippi State, maybe more so than Ole Miss, I think the matchup matters, because what we know they're not great at is shooting the ball. And surprisingly, one of the most shocking stats in the SEC this year for me is how bad Mississippi State has been in defending the three. They're allowing teams shoot 37%. That's 332nd, I think, nationally. And so they got to figure some of those. Yeah, they got to figure some of those things out, because guess what? You go out and get one of these, mid-major type teams you play in the first round or something like that, who just runs their offense and shoots 25 threes a game. I don't like that